When your adult children don't respect you. 6 powerful ways to regain respect. Has this ever happened to you? You're sharing a story at the family dinner table when your adult son rolls his eyes and says, "Mom, that's not how it happened." Or your daughter interrupts with, "Dad, nobody cares about that old stuff anymore." That sting you feel? That's the pain of disrespect from the very people you sacrificed everything to raise. What if I told you that the way you're responding right now might be making it worse? I discovered this the hard way, and it cost me years of painful family dynamics before I finally cracked the code. Today, I'm going to reveal the 6 most powerful ways to transform how your adult children treat you, without arguments, without resentment, and without damaging your relationship. By the end of this video, you'll have a clear roadmap to becoming the respected parent you deserve to be. But first, let me ask you this. When was the last time you felt truly valued by your children? Keep that moment in mind as we go through these strategies, because we're going to bring that feeling back into your everyday life. And stay with me, because at the 10-minute mark, I'll share the single most effective technique that changed everything for one mother whose children wouldn't even take her phone calls, to having them ask for her advice every week. The painful shift no one warns you about. There comes a time in life when the roles between parents and children start to shift. You spend decades raising them, guiding them, sacrificing for them. But then one day, you realize something has changed. Maybe they ignore your advice. Maybe they dismiss your opinions. Maybe they talk down to you, or, worse, they make you feel like a burden. And it hurts, deeply. If your children have started treating you with less respect than you deserve, you might feel frustrated, even angry. You might want to remind them of everything you've done for them, of the years you spent putting them first. I remember feeling this way with my own children. After decades of being the rock of the family, suddenly my opinions were met with eye rolls and dismissive comments. "That's outdated thinking, Mom," they'd say. Or worse, they'd talk about me in the third person while I was sitting right there. "She doesn't understand how things work anymore." But here's the truth that took me years to learn. Getting angry won't fix it. In fact, it often makes things worse. Instead, there's a much more effective approach to regaining their respect, without fighting, without arguments, and without resentment. Today, I'm going to share 6 powerful shifts, simple changes in the way you respond that can completely transform how your children see you. Some of these might surprise you, even challenge what you believe about parent-child relationships. But if you stay until the end, you'll discover how to regain your place as a respected, valued figure in their lives. Action 1. Stop chasing their approval. One of the biggest mistakes parents make, especially as they grow older, is trying too hard to please their children. Maybe you've noticed yourself doing it. You go out of your way to accommodate their busy schedules. You say yes when you want to say no. You put their needs ahead of your own, hoping that if you just do enough, they'll appreciate you more. But here's the painful truth I had to learn the hard way. The more you chase their approval, the less they respect you. Let me say that again because it's that important. The more you chase their approval, the less they respect you. You see, respect isn't earned through self-sacrifice. It's earned through self-respect. If you're always bending over backward, always giving in, always trying to keep the peace, what you're really teaching them is that your feelings come second. And once they start believing that, it's easy for them to take you for granted. I once knew a woman named Margaret, a strong, independent lady in her younger years. She raised 4 children as a single mother, put herself through nursing school, and never backed down from a challenge. But as she got older, something changed. She started letting her children make all the decisions. She rearranged her schedule around their needs. She kept her opinions to herself and even ignored the way they spoke down to her. "I just want to keep the family together," she told me once, her voice barely above a whisper. But what happened? Her children stopped valuing her. They saw her as someone who would always adjust, always agree, always stay silent. She thought she was keeping the peace, but what she was really doing was losing her voice. The turning point came during a holiday dinner when her son-in-law made a dismissive comment about old people's opinions. Instead of staying quiet, Margaret straightened her spine and said calmly, "That's an interesting perspective. I've lived through 7 decades of change, and while I don't know everything, I do know that dismissing someone based on their age is rarely the path to wisdom." The table went silent. For the first time in years, they saw not the accommodating grandmother, but the strong woman who had overcome incredible odds. If your children don't respect you, the first step isn't to demand it. It's to stop acting like you need it. Set boundaries. Say no when you need to. Speak your mind even if they don't like what you have to say. Because the moment you start respecting yourself, they'll start seeing you differently. One of my subscribers, Barbara from Michigan, tried this approach after years of feeling invisible at family gatherings. The first time I politely but firmly disagreed with my daughter about politics, she was shocked, Barbara wrote to me. But the next day, she called me specifically to ask what I thought about another issue. It was like she suddenly remembered I have a brain. Remember, your value doesn't decrease based on someone's inability to see your worth, even if that someone is your child. Action 2. Don't argue, lead by example. When your children dismiss your opinions, talk over you, or treat you with disrespect, your first instinct might be to argue, to remind them of everything you've done, to demand that they listen. But let me tell you something that will save you years of frustration. Arguing never works. Think about it. When was the last time you convinced someone to respect you by fighting for it? When has raising your voice or listing your sacrifices ever made someone truly change how they see you? Respect isn't won through words. It's earned through presence, through the way you carry yourself, through the way you respond when others try to test your patience. If you meet disrespect with anger, all you're doing is confirming what they already believe, that they have power over you, that they can ruffle your feathers, that they're in control of the emotional temperature. I knew a man named Frank, a retired teacher who had spent his life leading a classroom with confidence. His deep voice and steady gaze had kept even the most rebellious teenagers in line. But at home, his grown children had started treating him like an afterthought. They ignored his advice, dismissed his concerns, and sometimes even laughed when he tried to correct them. At first, he argued back, trying to prove he still deserved their respect. "I taught hundreds of students who still write to thank me," he'd shout. "I ran a department of 30 teachers. I won't be dismissed in my own home." But the more he fought, the worse things got. His children saw his anger as proof that he was losing it with age. Then one day, Frank made a change. Instead of arguing, he started listening, really listening. When his son made a dismissive comment, instead of defending himself, he simply nodded and said, "That's an interesting perspective. I see it differently, but I appreciate your thoughts." He stopped chasing respect with words and instead carried himself like a man who already had it. He spoke calmly, with wisdom, without the need to win. And slowly, his children started noticing. They saw a man who wasn't desperate for their approval, who didn't need to prove himself, who simply was a figure of strength. 6 months later, his oldest son called him for advice about a work conflict. "I need someone who knows how to handle difficult people with grace," he said. "You always seem to know how to do that. If your children don't respect you, don't fight them for it. Show them what respect looks like by the way you treat yourself. Keep your dignity. Speak with confidence. And most importantly, never lower yourself to their level. Because when you hold your ground with grace, they will feel it. And in time, they'll follow your lead. As the ancient proverb says, the best sermon is a good example. Be the person you want your children to become. Action 3. Withdraw your emotional dependence. One of the hardest lessons to learn as you grow older is that you can't depend on your children for emotional fulfillment. You may love them deeply. You may want them to love and respect you in return. But the moment they sense that you need them to feel valued, the power in the relationship shifts. Here's the reality that took me years to accept. People, even your own children, respect those who are emotionally independent. When you rely on them for validation, affection, or attention, it puts pressure on them. And instead of feeling grateful, they start feeling burdened. They might pull away. They might start treating you with impatience or even irritation. And the more you chase their love, the less freely they give it. I once knew a woman named Helen. She was a kind-hearted mother who had given everything to her children, moved to be closer to them, arranged her schedule around their visits, called them daily to check in. As they grew older and got busy with their own lives, she found herself waiting by the phone, hoping they'd call. When they didn't, she called them instead, often too often. She reminded them how much she missed them, how she wished they would visit more. But instead of bringing them closer, it pushed them away. They started seeing her calls as an obligation instead of something they looked forward to. They would let her go to voicemail, then text back, "Sorry, busy right now." Helen was heartbroken. "After everything I've done," she told me through tears, "they can't even spare 10 minutes to talk to their mother." Then one day, Helen did something different. After our conversation, she decided to take a step back. She stopped waiting. She stopped calling first. Instead, she started focusing on herself, picking up new hobbies, going out with friends, taking care of her own happiness. She joined a painting class she'd always been interested in. She started volunteering at a local literacy program. She rekindled friendships she had let slide while focusing on her children. And something surprising happened. Her children started calling more. They started respecting her time, seeing her as someone with a full life of her own rather than someone waiting by the phone for their attention. "Mom, are you free this weekend?" her daughter asked one day. "I'd love to see your new paintings and catch up." The lesson is simple but profound. The less you depend on your children to make you feel needed, the more they will start valuing your presence. When you show them that you can stand strong on your own, that your happiness doesn't depend on their validation, they will start respecting you not out of obligation, but because they genuinely admire the life you've built for yourself. As Eleanor Roosevelt wisely said, "No one can make you feel inferior without your consent," and that includes your children. Action 4. Set boundaries and enforce them. One of the biggest reasons children lose respect for their parents is because the parents let them. If you allow your children to talk to you disrespectfully, dismiss your opinions, or treat you as if your time and feelings don't matter, they will keep doing it. Not because they are bad people, but because people, especially family, will always treat you the way you allow them to. Setting boundaries doesn't mean cutting off your children or creating conflict. It means calmly and firmly deciding what kind of behavior you will and will not accept. And more importantly, it means enforcing those boundaries when they are crossed. I remember a man named Robert, a retired businessman who had spent his life running a company with discipline and confidence. His employees respected him, his competitors admired him, and his industry recognized him with numerous awards. But when it came to his adult children, he struggled. They interrupted him when he spoke, dismissed his concerns, and even criticized the way he lived his life. "Dad, you really should sell that house. It's too much for you to maintain at your age," they'd say, even though he loved his home and had no trouble caring for it. "Dad, just let us handle the investments. These things are complicated nowadays," they'd insist, despite his decades of financial success. At first, he tolerated it. He told himself it wasn't worth the fight. He wanted to be the cool dad, not the demanding father. But over time, he realized that every time he stayed silent, he was teaching them that their behavior was acceptable. He was training them to disrespect him. So one day, Robert changed his approach. When his son interrupted him, he calmly said, "I'd like to finish my thought. I'll continue speaking when you're ready to listen." When his daughter dismissed his opinion about how to handle a financial matter, he simply replied, "You don't have to agree with me, but I expect you to respect that I've managed money successfully for over 40 years. I'm still capable of making my own decisions." And when they continued to push his limits, he made it clear. If they couldn't treat him with basic respect, he wouldn't be spending time with them. "I love you both very much," he told them, "but I won't be spoken to as if I'm a child or an invalid. When you're ready to interact with me as the competent adult that I am, I'm here." And you know what happened? They started listening. At first, they resisted. There were tense moments and even a few weeks without contact. But over time, they realized their father wasn't backing down. They saw that he valued himself enough to demand respect. And because of that, they started giving it to him. Now, family dinners are different. They ask for his input. They listen when he speaks. Not because he forced them to, but because he showed them that respect wasn't optional. It was necessary for a relationship with him. If your children don't respect you, it's time to ask yourself, are you allowing it? Because if you don't set boundaries, they won't set them for you. And if you don't stand up for yourself, no one else will. As Maya Angelou famously said, "You teach people how to treat you by what you allow, what you stop, and what you reinforce." What are you teaching your children right now? Action 5. Stop giving without appreciation. One of the quickest ways to lose respect is to keep giving to people who don't appreciate it. And as parents, We do this more often than we realize. We give our time, our energy, our support, even when it's not acknowledged, even when it's taken for granted, even when we're met with nothing but entitlement. But here's the truth that took me years to learn. When you give to someone who doesn't appreciate it, you don't build love. You don't build respect. You build expectation. They stop seeing your kindness as something valuable and start seeing it as something they are entitled to. And the moment you stop, they don't feel grateful. They feel inconvenienced. I once knew a man named George, a father who had always been generous with his children. He helped them financially whenever they needed it, dropped everything to assist them, and even rearranged his life to accommodate their needs. Need money for a down payment? George wrote the check. Car broke down. George was there in minutes. Babysitter canceled? George cleared his calendar. But instead of gratitude, he was met with complaints. You're late, they'd say when he arrived to help. That's not enough, they'd suggest when he gave them money. They didn't say thank you, they expected more. And the worst part? When he finally needed their help, when he had surgery and needed someone to drive him to follow-up appointments, they were too busy. Sorry, Dad, I've got this thing at work, his son texted. Can't you just take an Uber? His daughter suggested. George was devastated. He had given everything, and when he needed just a fraction returned, they couldn't be bothered. Then one day, George made a change. He stopped overextending himself. He stopped offering help before it was even asked. And most importantly, he started saying no when he needed to. When his daughter called asking if he could watch the kids on short notice, he replied, I'm sorry, I have plans today. I'd be happy to help next week if you give me advance notice. When his son asked for money to renovate his kitchen, George said, I won't be able to contribute to that, but I'm happy to share some cost-saving tips I used when I did my remodel. At first, his children were frustrated. They didn't understand why he wasn't bending over backward for them anymore. There were tense conversations and even accusations that he didn't care about them. But over time, something shifted. They started valuing his time. They started appreciating his efforts. Because suddenly, they realized that his generosity wasn't unlimited. It was a gift, not a guarantee. And something remarkable happened. When they did receive his help, they started saying thank you. They started acknowledging his contributions. And most importantly, they started offering their own help in return, not because they had to, but because they wanted to reciprocate the value he provided in their lives. If you feel like your children don't respect your time, your effort, or your kindness, take a step back. Ask yourself, are you giving more than you should? And if so, what would happen if you stopped? Because when you teach people that your generosity is conditional on respect, they will start treating it that way. As the saying goes, never allow someone to be your priority while allowing yourself to be their option. Action 6. Build a life outside of them. One of the most powerful ways to regain your children's respect is to show them that your happiness doesn't revolve around them. As parents, it's natural to devote ourselves to our children, to make them the center of our lives. For years, even decades, they were our primary focus, our biggest responsibility, our greatest joy. But as we get older, that dynamic shifts. And if you've spent your entire life prioritizing them, they may start seeing you as someone who has nothing else going on. People respect those who have their own purpose, their own interests, their own sense of fulfillment. And if your children see that you rely on them for entertainment, validation, or meaning, they might start feeling suffocated, or worse, they might start seeing you as someone who has no life of your own. I knew a woman named Eleanor, a widow in her late 70s. After her husband passed, she poured everything into her children's lives, checking in constantly, giving advice they didn't ask for, expecting them to fill the space that her husband once did. She called them daily. She questioned their decisions. She inserted herself into every aspect of their lives. I just want to be involved, she told me. Is that so wrong? But instead of drawing them closer, it pushed them away. They visited less. Their calls became shorter. They started forgetting to tell her about important events. And Eleanor felt more alone than ever. Then she made a choice that changed everything. She joined a book club at her local library. She started traveling with friends she hadn't seen in years. She volunteered at a community center teaching English to immigrants, something she'd always wanted to do but never had time for. She stopped making her children the center of her world. She stopped waiting for their calls, their visits, their approval. And something incredible happened. Her children started reaching out more. They were curious about her book club selections. They asked about her travels. They wanted to hear stories about her students. "Mom seems so interesting lately," her son told his sister. "She's busier than I am." They admired her independence. They respected her choices. They saw her not as a needy parent, but as a vibrant, engaged person with her own meaningful life. And most surprisingly to Eleanor, they started asking for her advice, not because she was forcing it on them, but because they genuinely valued her perspective as someone who was actively growing and learning. If your children don't respect you, ask yourself, do they see you as someone with a full, meaningful life? Or do they see you as someone waiting around for their attention? Because when you show them that you are living, not just existing, they will start seeing you in a completely different light. As Helen Keller wisely said, life is either a daring adventure or nothing at all. Which are you choosing? The transformation begins today. Respect is not something you can demand from your children. It's something you inspire, through the way you carry yourself, through the way you set boundaries, and through the way you live your life. If they have started treating you with less care, less consideration, or less respect, don't waste your energy getting angry. Instead, shift your approach. Stop chasing their approval, because the less you need it, the more they'll give it. Lead by example, because your dignity speaks louder than your words. Withdraw your emotional dependence, because the more self-sufficient you are, the more they'll respect your presence. Set boundaries, because people will only treat you as well as you require them to. Stop giving without appreciation, because when generosity is taken for granted, it loses its value. And most importantly, build a life outside of them, because people respect those who have their own purpose, their own joy, and their own sense of fulfillment. If you do these things, something incredible will happen. Your children will start seeing you in a different light, not as someone waiting for their attention, but as someone who commands respect simply by being who they are. And in time, that respect will come back to you, not because you demanded it, but because you earned it. I'd love to hear your experiences. Which of these 6 strategies resonated most with you? Or do you have a 7th strategy that worked in your family? Share your wisdom in the comments below. Your insight might be exactly what another parent needs to hear today. If this video helped you, please give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who might need this message. Your support helps us reach more people who are struggling with these same challenges. And remember, it's never too late to change the dynamic with your children. The respect you deserve is waiting for you on the other side of these 6 powerful shifts. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.